Hello and welcome to my best-selling sight reading course, described by one reviewer as the best course not only in Udemy, also on the entire internet. Their words, not mine. It is the result of over a decade of testing on my one-on-one students, who included signed artists and senior record executives. And by the end of the course, you'll be able to simply see a note on the page and play it on the piano straight away. Now, there are a few things that this course doesn't cover. It doesn't cover rhythm, it doesn't cover key signatures, and it doesn't get you to play complete pieces of music. All of those things are covered in later courses of mine. What this course does is it does one thing, and it does it really well. It is a 100% original method that trains you to simply see a note on the page and play it on the keyboard straight away. So how is my method different from the traditional way of teaching sight reading? Well, the traditional way of teaching sight reading gets you to memorize phrases which help you remember the names of the notes on the lines and spaces in the treble and bass clefs. So let me explain what that means. For instance, the names of the notes on the lines in the treble clef are E, G, B, D, F. So the traditional way of teaching sight reading says just memorize the phrase, "Every good boy deserves favor," and that will help you remember the names of the notes on the lines in the treble clef. Then you have the spaces in the treble clef. So the names of the notes on the spaces in the treble clef is F, A, C, E. So the traditional method says just remember the word face, and it'll help you remember those. Then we have all of the names of the notes on the lines and spaces in the bass clef. So the names of the notes on the lines in the bass clef are G, B, D, F, A. So the traditional method says just learn the phrase "good boys deserve favor always," and that helps you remember them. Then we have the spaces in the bass clef, and they are A, C, E, G. So the traditional method says just learn the phrase "all cows eat grass," and that helps you remember those. Now, as you probably noticed, I was exerting quite a bit of mental effort remembering all of that. That is because no professional musician uses this method, okay? I want to train you to think like a professional musician. There are a bunch of ways in which the traditional way of teaching sight reading is really bad, okay? So first of all, that is a lot to remember. You have to memorize 4 different phrases just to get a single note name. And there's no easy way of remembering whether you're supposed to be using, every good boy or good boy deserves favor. So it's easy to mix them up. By contrast, my method is much easier to remember. I start by teaching you where the symbols for the treble and bass clef come from, and then everything is built around that. Secondly, the traditional method is slow. You have to recite an entire phrase like "every good boy deserves favor." Just remember that the top line of the treble clef is an F. By contrast, my method gets you to do interactive tests so that your recognition of notes becomes a reflex. Thirdly, the traditional method doesn't even tell you where on the keyboard you're playing. So for instance, if you recite "every good boy deserves favor," the favor tells you that you should be playing an F, but it doesn't tell you which F to play, and there are 8 Fs on a full-size keyboard. By contrast, my method teaches you not only which note you're playing, but also where on the keyboard it is. Fourthly, the traditional method only teaches you to recognize 18 notes. So you have 5 lines plus 4 spaces in the treble clef. 5 and 4 is 9. Then you have 5 lines and 4 spaces in the bass clef. That's another 9 notes. 9 and 9 is 18. But there are 88 notes on a full-size keyboard. The traditional method doesn't even teach you middle C. Okay, so 18 notes is not enough. My method teaches you to recognize 56 notes instantly on a keyboard. So you don't really need to know the outer extremities, the very high notes and the very low notes, but you do need to be able to recognize more than 18 notes on a keyboard. So I teach you to recognize 56. Lastly, I don't even think in terms of note names when I'm sight reading. I just see a note on the page and play it on the piano. And if you think about it, there are no note names on a score, and there are no note names on a piano keyboard. So it doesn't really make sense to see a note on the page, translate that note into a note name in your head, and then translate that note name into a note on the piano. You kind of want to cut out the middleman and just see a note and play it, which is what my course trains you how to do. Now, I do use a few note names at the beginning of the course, but I only use 3 of them, and then I very rapidly get you to do these interactive tests so that you start, forgetting about the note names, and your playing of the notes becomes a reflex, and by the end of the course, it's completely visual. It is a 100% original, color-coded reference note system for recognizing notes on a piano score. As one reviewer says, I assure you that by the end of the course, you will not be seeing a music sheet the same way again. So if you're curious to see what it's all about, sign up, and you can always get a refund later. Thank you for listening, and happy studying.